The Chargers don't have a wide receiver one, and I mean a true wide receiver one that is like the go-to guy when you need him in crucial situations. They drafted 3 wide receivers and they signed DJ Chark in free agency, but they still don't have like any proven threat at that position after losing both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams this offseason. There is one major question that Joe Hortiz is going to answer this season, and that is how much he values the wide receiver position. The Chargers, they have the opportunity to make a splash move at wide receiver in the next few months, but will Joe Hortiz actually pull the trigger? Let me give you the full breakdown, and make sure to listen until the end because I think I may be onto something here, okay? Just listen. So Tom Telesco left Joe Hortiz in a very difficult position, specifically in the wide receiver room. He ended up parting ways with his 2 big-time wide receivers because of it. He evaluated both of them as players and their contracts and determined that the best move was to get their contracts off the books and leave that wide receiver room in like a very tough spot. He knew that he needed to address the wide receiver position urgently, and that's why he traded up in the second round to secure his guy, Ladd McConkey. He also added 2 7th-round wide receivers in Brennan Rice and Cornelius Johnson, and then he wasn't even done yet. He went out and got DJ Chark in free agency after the draft, which that was a skill set that was missing on this team, which is the ability to play the X wide at this position later on. And I'm talking specifically about Josh Palmer because he is entering the final year of his rookie contract, and wide receivers nowadays, they get paid a ton of money, even if they're just around average, which, I think we can all agree Joshua Palmer, he is a solid but average NFL wide receiver at this point in his career, okay? If they hit on both Ladd McConkey, which I think that they might because he's already impressing in OTAs with Justin Herbert throwing in the ball and establishing a good connection with him, and they hit on just one of those 2 wide receivers in the 7th round, then they would have the flexibility to allow Josh Palmer to walk in free agency for probably some pretty big money, and then that would net them a nice and juicy comp pick. There's even an argument to be made here that even if you hit on just one of these rookie wide receivers, that you still let Josh Palmer walk because wide receiver is going to have a lot of depth in every single draft class just because of the way that college football has changed. And Joe Hortiz has said that many times now. If Josh Palmer has a healthy season this year, I would honestly expect him to get around $20 million a year, or maybe even more than that in free agency, which that may sound crazy to some of you guys, but keep in mind, Brandon Cooks is getting that much money, and he signed 2 years ago in free agency. And the value of every position, naturally, it goes up every single year because the salary cap goes up every single year. And that's why Jared Goff, who just signed this offseason, is getting more money than Justin Herbert right now, who signed just like, I think it was maybe 2 years ago. And then also Kirk Cousins, who signed this offseason, is getting the same amount of money per year as Patrick Mahomes, who signed in 2020. But also, guys just like reset the market. I mean, look at Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is now the 2nd highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. And listen, he's a really good wide receiver. I'm a USC guy. He is a USC guy. I like him, but I don't think anyone would argue that he is the 2nd best wide receiver in the NFL. He just got paid the most recently. And then that's why you look at guys like Justin Jefferson, who's holding out right now of OTAs for the Vikings. He wants to be paid like the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL, and he deserves it. But he is not the only one set to get paid very soon at that position because Brandon Aiyuk, T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, and Elijah Moore, they are all free agents after this season. And some of those guys are going to get extended before they hit free agency, and each one of them is set to make more than $25 million a year. The wide receiver market is about to blow up, and a lot of these guys are going to be getting a bunch of money. And if you want to get a bunch of money and you're good at fantasy sports, then you can click on my link in the description and enter my code McLane. That is MACLANE. You will get a special pick'em and up to $250 in bonus cash. I love Underdog, even though I'm not good enough to make wide receiver money in fantasy sports. But anyway, I don't think that the Chargers want to get anywhere near that number with Josh Palmer, and I would expect them to allow him to walk in free agency in order to get that comp pick in the future. What I am going to be keeping an eye on over the course of the season, though, is how well Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson play, because if the Chargers don't think that either one of them are developing the way that they had hoped, then they might enter the trade market for a big name wide receiver this season. Or even, I don't know, if Ladd McConkey is struggling with injuries or, something happens with him, they might feel the need to find a better weapon for Justin Herbert, because if Ladd McConkey is injured and, Quentin Johnston doesn't have a resurgence and Josh Palmer is injured because he's struggled with injuries, there's a lot of things that can happen with this wide receiver room. You guys know that. And we know that Joe Hortiz has $27 million of cap space left to play with. So would Joe Hortiz spend that cap space to go out and make a splash move at wide receiver this season? Well, I don't know, because he wasn't willing to pay big money to Keenan Allen or Mike Williams. Question is that because of their age and their injuries, like exclusively? Or is it because he just didn't want to dedicate that much cap space to the wide receiver room? Obviously, I think both of those things came into play, but here is the most interesting part of this whole equation. Stay with me. Joe Hortiz, he's got $27 million in cap space to work with, and he has been clear that he wants to be active in the trade market during this season. Wide receivers, they become available all the time in the trade market, and with all of these guys set to get paid soon, I'd be willing to bet that some of them are going to be available during the season or even in training camp. Both Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel were talked about being on the trade block during the draft, and then the Niners even drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round. They have come out and said that neither Brandon Aiyuk or Deebo are available anymore, but I'm like, come on. I mean, that's like the Cardinals saying that Josh Rosen is the guy before they draft Kyler Murray. They were shopping both of those wide receivers during the draft, and then they drafted a wide receiver in the first round. And then you look at Justin Jefferson. He is holding out of OTAs right now. I don't know if he's going to be available, because it would be crazy if the Vikings traded him, especially when they just got a rookie quarterback. I think they're going to pay him big money, but T. Higgins also is holding out right now. But the guy that I really want to talk about is DK Metcalf, because he makes a ton of freaking sense, man. He is with a new regime in Seattle. He has Geno Smith at quarterback. I think that he might become available maybe around midseason, and the Chargers could look at that and commit to a trade for him. He signed a 3-year extension in 2022, so he is on a reasonable deal with an out on his contract after the 2024 season, so they would remain flexible with the cap as well as with the future of this team, because they wouldn't be 100% committed to him for the 2025 season. He would also be reuniting with Sanjay Lal, his former wide receiver coach in Seattle, and he would be paired with Justin Herbert, a strong-arm quarterback who can throw him that deep ball that he is so good at. Listen, man, DK Metcalf, he plays with bad intentions and he can block, and we all remember that play where he ran down Budda Baker on that interception. There is no argument that this is a Jim Harbaugh kind of receiver. I think I may be onto something here, man. I think that this is a trade made in heaven, and it is very reasonable to believe that he becomes available in trade talks, because the Seahawks, they're not going to be competitive this year. They're in the same division as the Rams and the Niners. Plus, they got a first-year head coach. Plus, they got Geno Smith at quarterback. I mean, come on. The writing is on the wall. DK Metcalf would take the pressure off of our rookie wide receivers and give Justin Herbert a legitimate threat that defenses would have to be cautious of. Those two together are just an explosive play waiting to happen. And the money works out, the contract is set up perfectly, and the connection is there already with the coaching staff. And then on top of all of that, I think it would be a seamless fit in this offense, and would even allow our other wide receivers like Quentin Johnston and Ladd McConkey to have more success. Ladd McConkey in the slot, DK Metcalf out wide, with a rotation of DJ Chark, Quentin Johnston, and Josh Palmer for this season, while he's still on the team. That is a wide receiver room that we can be proud of, like genuinely. And it wouldn't break the bank with all these wide receivers about to blow the top off of the wide receiver market, because DK Metcalf is still under contract for 2 years. So here's what I want Joe Hortiz to do. You let Josh Palmer walk in free agency after this season, which naturally is going to save you about $20 million of cap space, because you're not going to be paying him. And then you get a comp pick that will probably become a 4th rounder, trade a 3rd round pick for DK Metcalf at some point this year, and then you have your true X wide receiver and go-to guy for Justin Herbert. That way you basically get DK Metcalf for a swap of your 3rd round pick this year, and then you get a 4th, let's just say like a 5th round pick in return from your comp pick farm in like 2 years. And then you go from paying Josh Palmer, let's just say like 21 million a season, to DK Metcalf getting 24 million this year and then 29.5 next season. The only question is, does Joe Hortiz want to make a big move like that at wide receiver? Or is Joe Hortiz just fine with the wide receiver room the way that it's currently constructed? He's always looking to add competition and get better at every single position. And even though he has added 4 wide receivers to this team, like, yeah, he's addressed the need. We know that he would not be afraid of continuing to add there because, I mean, look, he gave the most money of anybody so far to Bud Dupree when our edge position is the strongest on this team. I know that I might sound crazy to some of you guys, but I think this is just something to really seriously consider and keep an eye on for any wide receiver, honestly, because 27 million in cap space, that's a lot of money that he has to work with. I just think DK Metcalf, he might be the guy. Everything works out so well. And I know Lad McConkey looks good so far in OTAs, but why not have both? DK Metcalf is not going to cannibalize the targets that Lad McConkey is going to get. Those are 2 different amount of targets that this offense is going to dedicate resources to. And then also DK Metcalf, he's a mean freaking blocker. So he is going to help out in the run game as well. It makes too much sense. And if you want to see everyone that is looking good in OTA so far, you can click this video right here. Spoiler alert, Lad McConkey is one of them.